today we're going to be talking about the new virus, the new strain. And before we ever talk about COVID or vaccines or anything, I always like to remind people what the science is. The science is that vaccinated or not, everyone is likely to get COVID at some point. Many experts are now saying, and of course, so you're going to get it. Everybody's going to get it. And so I tell people at my live shows, prepare to get it. And it's interesting what they don't tell you. And then, by the way, it won't be eradicated. So everybody, I think, are still operating under the assumption that if enough people get vaccinated, that we can get rid of it. Well, according to the WHO, COVID-19 won't be eradicated. Global health experts expect COVID-19 to circulate and mutate in a similar way to the flu. So it will be here forever, just like the other coronaviruses. So that's what people need to keep in mind, that everyone's going to get it and it'll never go away. So here's the new variant, right? So ABC News, here's how they try to scare you over it, right? They got to get you scared right away. First thing scary, because that's what gets them views. That's what gets them ratings. That's what gets them clicks. Worried scientists. Oh, they're all just sitting around like this. Worried scientists in South Africa are scrambling. Ooh, I'm worried and scrambling. To combat the lightning spread. Look at that. Lightning. Boy, they got a lot of buzzwords that scare the crap out of you, don't they? To combat the lightning spread across the country of the new and highly transmissible Omicron COVID-19 variant. I prefer the way Joe Biden says it. I prefer to say it Omicron. It's more fun to say it that way. The Omicron COVID-19 variant as the world grapples with the emergence. Oh, we're grappling. It's lightning spread. They're worried. They're scrambling. That's a lot of frickin' scare words for one tweet, isn't it? Here's another tweet from Eric Topol, which Omicron, I want to say Omicron like Joe Biden. Omicron was first detected from a sample collected in Botswana on 11th of November. And then he has a quote. He says, in conclusion, the overall level of risk is assessed as high, and he puts it in caps, to very high. Risk of what? What's the risk? Risk of death? Is the risk of death high to very high? Is the risk of serious illness high? Or is it contracting it? Because the initial reports out of South African Medical Association says Omicron variant causes mild disease. That's the initial report. So that's kind of funny that they would, it's high, very high. Lightning, stop scrambling, worried. It's just grapples. So now let's go to the guy. This is the guy, the head guy at the NIH, the NIH director, Dr. Francis Collins. And here's what so listen to how, is that Dana Bash? Is that what this is?
Yes, it looks like.
Listen to what, she wants to be scared. This is what, here we go.
I want to go straight to the director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins. Dr. Collins, thank you so much for joining me. So what is it about this variant that has experts so worried?
Ooh, what is it? Are we worried? Why are everybody so worried? Everybody, we're still worried, right? We're going to be worried. So now he says a bunch of stuff that sounds scary, but then watch how he concludes. Watch this.
I think the main thing that has us focused on this and has caused a lot of us to be sort of 24/7 on Zoom calls for the last 4 days is that it has so many mutations. Omicron has more than 50 variants that make it different than the original virus, including more than 30 that are in the spike protein.
50 differences, 30 inside that sounds like a lot. I have no idea what any of that means, and neither does anyone else. It's got over 50 variants, 30 inside the spike protein. No one knows. It sounds scary, though. But again, let's watch how he concludes.
brought my little model along in case
Oh,
people have
it's
forgotten
scary.
what this looks like. So
I don't want
these
that.
are those spike proteins that sit on the outside of the virus and enable it to get inside your cells.
I don't want that
And
in
the
me.
Omicron version of that, because of those changes, is going to have a different shape.
Oh, different
And of course,
shapes.
that's also what the antibodies are directed against. So the question is, will the antibodies generated by the vaccines that we have all had or should have had, will that enable us to be protected against?
Are we going to be protected? Are we going to be protected? Let's see.
This virus? I think there's good reasons to think it will probably be okay, but
Probably going to be okay. But why don't we scare the shit out of everyone for a while? 50 different variants, 30 was inside the old population. Oh, Jesus Christ. Look, I brought a thing with all the things on it. Look at that. It'll probably be okay. Holy shit. Now, Dana Bash, that does not sit well with her. She does not want us to, she wants to make sure can still be scared. Ready? Watch.
it's a great reason to go get boosted.
Go get boosted.
Have you seen anything to suggest that this new variant causes more serious illness than...
Does it cause more serious illness? Right. Isn't that kind of...
Play it again. Play it again.
It's a great reason to go get boosted.
Have you seen anything to suggest that this new variant causes more serious illness than previous strains?
Well, that's another really important question. How severe would it be? We have no data so far to suggest that it would be. There's even a bit of a report from South Africa that maybe people with this are milder than the usual case, but they're...
That shit doesn't stop her. So there's no evidence to state that it would be more serious. In fact, the initial reports are the opposite. Still, that's not going to stop her. Watch, let's keep going.
mostly young people who have mild illness anyway, so I would say we just don't know. We do think it's more contagious when you look at how rapidly it's spread through multiple districts in South Africa. It has the earmarks, therefore, of being particularly likely to spread from one person to another.
Well, that was one of the things that got everybody so concerned about Delta was because it was more contagious than the original novel coronavirus.
Right.
Whoa.
Do you think that the new variant Omicron is even more contagious than Delta?
Can it be more contagious?
We don't know yet. It certainly shows the signs of being able to spread quick.
Now, what Dr. Robert Malone said when he was on this show, he predicted that this would happen, that the virus would mutate and become more contagious, but he said less deadly. Now, the initial reports sound that to be backing up that conclusion. Again, we don't have any conclusions yet because it's too early. We won't know for a couple of weeks. But here we go. So the mutations, everyone knew these mutations were coming. That's why they have to have a different flu vaccine. Well, again, I'm not going to talk about that.
What we don't know is whether it can compete with Delta. You know, we've had occasions before where we thought a particular variant was going to take over in the United States. Remember Beta? That's
I remember.
B1351. It never really took off because Delta was so incredibly effective at spreading that it couldn't compete. We don't know what Omicron will look like if it gets to our country, and I hope it doesn't, but it's fairly likely we'll see cases.
Well,
will it be able to compete or will it fizzle?
Do you think it's already here in the United States?
Is it here? Is it already here?
We have no evidence that it is, so I'm on the fence about that. We will find out because CDC is looking at tens of thousands of viral isolates every week, and so we're going to find out if it's here.
So big picture, Dr. Collins, does this new variant set us back in...
Big picture. Come on. Give me some bad news. And we got something bad? Don't you have anything bad for me? I mean, this new thing, it's got to fuck things up for everybody, right? I mean, it's got to make things worse.
...our efforts to end this pandemic once and for all?
So I'm going to back that up again. So just listen to her question and listen to what it implies. Here, I'm going to...
Can I just say this too, Jimmy? Just watch how often she smiles through this question.
Okay.
It's weird.
Okay. Oh, why does it do this sometimes? It stops rewinding. I don't know how to do this.
In our
every week, and so we're going to find out.
Here's the question.
So big picture, Dr. Collins, does this new variant set us back in our efforts to end this pandemic once and for all?
That is kind of weird.
Well, it's certainly not good news. We don't know yet how much of an impact this will have. It ought to redouble our efforts to use the tools that we have, which are vaccinations and...
So she says, does it set us back in ending this pandemic? Now, to me, that sounds like she's saying, hey, when are we going to get rid of this virus? Now, as I told you at the top of this segment, we're never going to get rid of it. It will keep mutating, and it will become, this is what the experts are saying, not Jimmy Dore, that it's become endemic. So maybe she's right in that sense that we'll leave the pandemic phase and go to an endemic phase, which means it just circulates forever. And we live with it. So, but it's, if you were, again, I would bet that 99.9% of the people who are watching this news program think that what she said on the surface is true, that we're going to end this pandemic, meaning get rid of the virus. Okay, and then he doesn't correct her. And watch the stuff that he doesn't say. This is interesting to me, the stuff he doesn't say. So let's watch this.
Boosters. And to be sure, we're getting those to the rest of the world, too, which the U.S. is doing more than any other country. It also means we need to pay attention to those mitigation strategies that people are just really sick of, like wearing masks when you're indoors with other people who might not be vaccinated, and keeping that social distance issue. I know, America, you're really tired of hearing those things, but the virus is not tired of us, and it's shape-shifting itself. If you imagine we're on a racetrack here, the virus just sort of emerged in a new version, and it's trying to catch up with us, and we have to use every kind of tool in our toolbox.
What toolbox? What tools?
In a situation that makes this worse.
But the only tools he mentioned were vaccines and masks. Did he mention? I didn't. Steph, did you catch him mentioning?
No.
Did anybody else catch him? Seriously, did anyone else? I'll play it again.
I don't know the tools.
I didn't. The only tools that I heard him is to get boosters, vaccinated, and masks.
Yes.
That's it. He doesn't mention any other tools. There are a lot of tools. For one thing, 200,000 people would still be alive in the United States who were attributed to be dead from COVID. They would still be alive if we had Medicare for all. So you're going to have that kind of massive federal spending to ensure everybody has health care? You mean that kind of thing like the rest of the world does? Expand Medicare for all to everybody so 200,000 more people would still be alive? You mean that kind? No, he doesn't mean that kind of tool. Okay, so that's one big. How about we build more hospitals instead of all the ones we've closed? I'm going to do a segment on that. You have no idea how many hospitals they've closed. In New York City, in the last 20 years, they went from around 75,000 hospital beds down to around 50-something hospital beds in New York City. So he doesn't talk about that. Like, hey, maybe we should reinvest in our hospitals, and maybe we should have some more. There's like, again, I don't want to misquote the numbers on this. There's a huge number of counties in America that don't even have ICUs. They don't even have ICUs. And then there's another huge percentage of counties that don't even have hospitals. And we're going to get to those numbers. But watch what he's not saying. He just says, well, let's back it up. Let me back it up again.
We can do
when we make the
impact this will have. It ought to redouble our efforts to use the tools that we have.
What are they?
Which are vaccinations and boosters. And to be sure, we're getting those to the rest of the world, too, which the U.S. is doing more than any other country. It also means we need to pay attention to those mitigation strategies that people are just really sick of, like wearing masks when you're indoors with other people who might not be vaccinated, and keeping that social distance issue. I know, America, you're really tired of hearing those things, but the virus is not tired of us, and it's shape-shifting itself. If you imagine we're on a racetrack here, the virus just sort of emerged in a new version, and it's trying to catch up with us, and we have to use every kind of tool in our toolbox to keep that.
So again, he mentioned 4 tools, vaccines and boosters. That's really one. That's the same thing. So 3 tools, all our tools. What are they? Vaccines, masks, and social distancing. The same thing they were telling us when this thing started. He's got nothing really. So if you go to the hospital, they don't treat you any differently than when this thing started. If you get sick from COVID, they don't treat you any different. Of course, Well, now we know there's monoclonals. How come he doesn't talk about monoclonals? Now we know fluvoxamine helps a lot. How come he doesn't talk about that? How come he doesn't talk about the importance of vitamin D? He doesn't talk about the importance of vitamin D. Super important. Every other doctor I watch on YouTube that talks about COVID, that they stress vitamin D. It never comes up. They never talk about the therapeutics that we have for it now. I'm talking about monoclonals. I'm talking about fluvoxamine, and there's other things. So isn't that interesting to think? So it's interesting what he's not saying and what Dr. Fauci never says. Dr. Fauci is supposed to be our leading doctor in America. He never talks about Medicare for all. He never talks about that thing that would have saved 200,000 lives during this. Isn't that interesting? I think that's interesting. So they're not telling me about all the tools. This guy's not even telling me about vitamin D or zinc. He's not telling you about zinc. That's another thing that's important to get prepared for when you're going to get COVID, because you're going to get COVID. So that's another thing. Make sure you get your vitamin Ds and your zinc. Other people are talking about the importance of vitamin K. So he doesn't talk about all the tools at all. He talks about 3 tools that we all know of already: vaccines, masks, and social distancing. He doesn't talk about anything else. Nothing new since this started? Nothing? Of course there is, and he won't tell you about it. Why? I don't know. I don't know why he's not telling us about it. But the good news is he sounds like he's being honest about, well, I can't. That's up for you to decide. How about that? Let's see. Is there any more to this?
From getting in a situation that makes this worse.
Dr.
We can do this, but we have to do it all together.
Dr. Francis Collins.
Okay, that's it. Again, nothing else. And we know the super importance of vitamin D. We know the super importance of that. And here's Joe Biden mispronouncing it. It's kind of funny.
Today, I want to take a few moments to talk about the new COVID variant, first identified last week in Southern Africa. It's called the Omicron. It is, to their credit, the scientific community in South Africa.
That's like something I would do.
The world of the emergence of this new variant.
That's like something I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do that. Not him. I'm the moron. Okay, here we go.
This kind of transparency is to be encouraged and applauded because it increases our ability to respond quickly to any new threats.
How?
And
how are you responding quickly? What are they doing?
that's exactly what we did.
What did you do?
The very day the World Health Organization identified the new variant, I took immediate steps to restrict travel from countries in Southern Africa. But while we...
You know that thing Donald Trump did and we called it racist? Remember that? We're going to do a segment. That's coming. I'm going to show you.
That travel restrictions can slow the speed of Omicron. It cannot prevent it. But here's what it does. It gives us time. It gives us time to take more actions. To move quicker, to make sure people understand you have to get your vaccine. You have to get the shot.
That's it. So it gives us time to take more actions. What action? The same one we've been saying ad nauseum. That's the only one. That's the only action they'll take. They're not going to increase ICU beds. They're not going to increase... they're not going to tell people to get their vitamin D. They're not going to tell people about monoclonals. They're not going to tell people about the therapeutics. They're only going to tell you, for whatever reason, they only tell you about the same three things they've been talking about since this thing started. And I find that highly irresponsible, if not criminal, on purpose. Get your zinc, get your vitamin D. Here we go. So I just want to, again, just everybody knows we're all going to get it at some point. The idea that we're going to live our lives without ever getting it is a fantasy and a dangerous one. Who said that? That's the epidemiologist and demographer at UC Irvine. A lot of people just don't understand that. We're all going to get it. I know. And that's what's driving the hatred, I think, of the unvaxxed. Is because people think, well, because they won't get vaxxed, I'm going to get it. No, you're going to get it anyway. You're going to get it anyway. And it's a fantasy. That's a fantasy that you're going to get out of this without getting COVID. That's a fantasy. You're going to get it. And they won't tell you to prepare for it. They'll tell you to prepare by getting vaccinated, which does reduce your chances of severe disease or death. It's going to hang around indefinitely like the flu, says this guy, Bruce Patterson. He's the CEO of something, and he's a virologist. 90% of infectious disease and virology experts believe that COVID will become endemic, meaning it will hang around indefinitely. And, of course, there's the COVID won't be eradicated. And here's a funny thing from the Babylon Bee. To defeat the new variant, experts recommend doing all the things that didn't work the first time. They got no new ideas, these guys. There's lots of new ideas out there. They just don't know about them, I guess. I like what Tim Dillon said. He says the only symptom of the look how he spells it. The only symptom of the variant will be your total loss of income. But not if you're rich. If you're like Jeff Bezos or an oligarch, you got way more wealthy as they shut down the economy. Isn't that something? They can shut down the economy and all the billionaires get richer? How does that work? I don't know. It sounds like a rigged game to me. It sounds like we live in a rapacious oligarchy. Now, here's our friend, Dr. John Campbell. He's got a great show on the YouTubes, and I learn everything that I knows about the COVIDs from this guy. This guy's almost I do some outside reading. So he's going to explain to us right now what's happening with this new variant in a way that seems balanced. And I have it on fast speed, so it doesn't take too long.
Most about this are the doctors that have actually treated the variant so far, and there's 2 of these in South Africa. So these are the ones to get to. Now, this is Dr. Angelique Cortez, South African.
So he's gonna reference 2 doctors who are already treating patients in South Africa that have this virus, this variant. And here's what they say. The first one is Dr. Angelique Cortez.
Association. I think she's the boss of that. Also a practicing clinician doctor in South Africa. First to raise the alarm on the new Omicron variant. So she's in an ideal position to comment. Direct quotes, this is a storm in a teacup. Good.
She said it's a storm in a teacup, which I'd never heard that saying before. But I guess it means it's not much of a storm.
Why everyone up in arms about this, she's saying. So far, we have so far what we have seen is very mild cases. This is a direct quote here. Very much. This is what she's saying. And of course, she's actually treated these cases in South Africa. 17th to 18th of November, her and her medical colleagues in South Africa noticed a change in the clinical picture. So this is just 10 and 11 days ago. They noticed a change in the clinical picture in South Africa. Now, this was after 10 weeks of having very low numbers in South Africa, which was good. She said that gave them a good breather. But then these new cases started to come. Cases still relatively low in South Africa, but picking up quickly. For now, it's extremely mild cases that we are seeing. Again, direct quote from Dr. Cortez. Looking at the mildness of these symptoms, I think it's been missed in other countries. Interesting. Certainly other African countries.
She's saying because the symptoms are so mild with this new variant that she's saying it's probably in other countries, but they've missed it. That's what she's saying. It's probably in other countries, but they just missed it because people don't go to the hospital with such mild. That's what she's saying. When you have such mild symptoms, it doesn't raise alarms. So people probably have it, but it just hasn't been diagnosed. That's what she's saying. Okay.
Well have been missed. So given that it's symptomatically mild, a lot of these cases, she believes, have not come to the attention of the testers in those countries. And of course, testing in a lot of other southern African countries, with the noted exception of South Africa, is very, very limited. She says it's severely mild. Just a tone of freak. I mean, it's not a medical term. She was just chatting on an interview, talking on an interview. So basically she's saying these are mild, very mild cases that they're seeing. Headache does seem to be a feature. Now, this is interesting, and I'm sure this will come up on Tim Spector's work over the next few months as well. What is different is the extreme tiredness. So a lot of people have been going to their doctors in South Africa saying, I'm just extremely tired, and they turn out to test positive for COVID. So headache with extreme tiredness seems to be the main clinical feature. She doesn't mention the sort of common cold, coryzal type features that we're seeing in the UK now in the vaccinated population with Delta. It's headache and extreme tiredness that the doctors in South Africa are seeing so far, with body aches, which isn't surprising. Mostly men under 40s that they're seeing at the moment in South Africa. Interesting. I really think the vaccine plays a role here. Breakthrough infections, but very, very mild. So she's saying the vaccine isn't important. is important. The vaccine is important, but they are seeing breakthrough infections in the vaccinated. But the good news is the infection that she's seeing in her vaccinated patients and in her colleagues' vaccinated patients, the infections that they're seeing in the vaccinated are very mild. This is the report from the clinicians in South Africa. You can call all of hospitals in Pretoria. You will see there's not a huge influx of patients with this Omicron, so not a lot of hospitalizations, at least in the Pretoria area. If Africa is not going to be vaccinated, you will see new variants coming up. So is Africa going to be vaccinated? Well, the uptake in South Africa is about 24% at the moment for fully vaccinated, but that's largely due to vaccine hesitancy. In other parts of Africa, we're still looking well into the single digits of people doubly vaccinated, 2, 3, 4, 5%. And if the world decides not to vaccinate Africa, which is a choice we can make, then if it decides not to vaccinate Africa, then it is totally inevitable we'll be seeing a string of these variants coming from Africa. It's completely inevitable. And this particular strain probably came from one immunocompromised individual. I don't know if we'll ever know that, but that's the most likely scenario. So President Biden, Boris Johnson, Ursula von der Leyen, Scott Morrison, True, whatever that guy in Canada's called. Do you want to vaccinate the world or not? Your choice. Do you want to vaccinate Africa or not? You can choose to vaccinate Africa, or you can choose not to bother. It's your choice, as this South African doctor so eloquently points out. So basically,
So now, what he seems to be saying there, and this is why I would love to be able to interview him. He seems to be saying that if we get the vaccine to everybody in Africa, that somehow that will stop the mutations. That's what that's what it sounds like to me. I don't know. I'm gonna have to get clarity on that. Is that what it sounds like to you, Steph, that he's saying? Now, again, there's this doctor in South Africa is saying that the people who are getting the breakthrough infections, meaning they're vaccinated and they still got the COVID virus anyway, she's saying they're mild if they're vaccinated. The cases are, she said, severely mild, which is kind of a weird wording, but here we go.
Dr. Angelique Cortez, not seeing severe cases at the moment. Now, she does say this could change. She's just reporting her clinical experience over the past 10, 11 days, but it's also more than that. It's a summation of the clinical experience of many doctors in South Africa. Now, to give this some balance, and I think it's important we do give it balance now, this is another South African doctor, Rudy Matiba, head of the intensive care unit at Soweto. Now, in Soweto, I believe the vaccination rate is particularly low. South African viewers can correct me on that, but I believe there's a relatively low vaccine uptake in Soweto. And he's at this hospital in Soweto. We're seeing a marked change in the demographic profile of patients with COVID-19, says the intensive care doctor. Now, this is where it is getting concerning, and this is my main concern, that younger people are going to be more affected. We've seen this in previous pandemics, that in later waves, younger people are affected more. This is my main concern at the moment. But let's carry on. We'll say what the doctor says. Direct quote, young people in their 20s to just over their late 30s are coming in with moderate to severe disease. Now, I do not like the sound of this. Young people with moderate to severe disease in Soweto, in South Africa. Some needing intensive care. About 65% are not vaccinated, and most of the rest are only half vaccinated. So 65% of the intensive care doctor's patients are not vaccinated, and most of the rest are only half vaccinated, 1 dose of vaccine. So it's looking like the South Africa experience is saying that you get mild disease if you've had 2 doses of vaccines, very, very mild disease in terms of probability. Greater risk if you've had 1 vaccine, and if you've had no vaccines at all, then I'm afraid it looks like you are at risk from Omicron. Now, I don't like, we've interviewed people who've had vaccine side effects and all sorts of problems, but it looks like the Omicron variant probably has shifted the risk-benefit analysis for vaccination in favour of vaccination. That's what it's looking like from the tentative South African data. Now, Dr. Cortez did say they're going to know all this for sure in a couple of weeks, but this is just based on clinical experience so far, which is all we've got Sunday the 28th of November. We've got a tale of 2 doctors here from South Africa. One, we believe, seeing mostly vaccinated patients, seeing very, very mild disease with headache, tiredness and body aches, but very, very mild. The other, in Soweto, an intensive care doctor seeing patients in low vaccine area, young people with more severe disease. So that's my concern for the world's young and unvaccinated. And when we say young, we're meaning young adults, even into middle-aged adults, adults into their 40s.
So there you go. There's both sides of the coin coming out of South Africa. So again, the vaccine seems to reduce the severity of the illness, and but the Delta and this new one seem highly contagious, and you can still get it and transmit it, even if you're vaccinated. So. There you go. Now, YouTube, the official policy is that vaccines reduce transmission. That's YouTube's official policy. And So there you go. That's the. So now I'm. So the next thing I'm going to talk about. Oh, by the way, and just so you know, the WHO reiterates warning against COVID boosters for healthy people. So that's what's weird, is the WHO seems to be saying one thing, while the United States government seems to be saying another, or Joe Biden anyway. And that guy from the NIH, the WHO, now the reason they say this is because they say it will reduce the rest of the world getting their, like we're going on our third shot when a lot of the world hasn't gotten their first shot. So the WHO is like, hey, let's get that to the rest of the world first. And they're not doing that. I'm going to guess because maybe there's not a lot of money in it. I don't know. Well, if there was a lot of money in it, so there's certainly the boosters certainly are paid for by the U.S. government. So there's money in it. But so that just to let you know that the WHO reiterates warning against COVID boosters for healthy people as U.S. weighs distribution of third shots. So it's amazing what people emphasize and what they don't emphasize about COVID. I think that's very telling. What people emphasize about the treatment of COVID or the handling of it or the way we should deal with this pandemic and what they don't say. It's very revealing. That guy from the NIH talked about all the tools. He didn't talk about anything other than the things they've been talking about for the last year and a half. You got nothing new? Nothing? Why won't you talk? Why won't they tell you about the importance of vitamin D? Why won't they tell you the importance of that? Why don't they tell you there's monoclonals available? Or the studies that show fluvoxamine are helpful. And anyway. Hey, we're doing live stand-up shows in Los Angeles, December 3rd, 10th, and 17th. The first 3 Fridays in December in Studio City at Two Roads Theater. If you're in Los Angeles area, see you there.